Test the claim.
One, firstly, about
Yeah.
what you were just
Yeah.
Just then we can go into Russia-Ukraine.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
What's interesting there is that all these things.
Yeah, that's wrong.
So, so the conversation was about, I think it was a very segue into a very interesting place.
Yeah.
Starting off with Elon Musk.
You're talking about Elon Musk and kind of relating it to his business accomplishments, but I was more interested in the idea of kind of building. I was interested in this kind of cult following that has emerged in support of him.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that, arguably he doesn't necessarily always deliver on his promises.
Yeah.
Yet there are people who will just almost blindly or seemingly blindly
Religiously. No pun
Yeah,
intended.
I was withholding
Yeah.
from saying it
Yeah.
explicitly, but
Yeah.
I think there is something almost religious feeling about it, like
Yeah.
some kind of a cult following.
Yeah.
I think there are other popular figures who have emerged,
Yeah.
let's say in social media recently,
Yeah.
who seem to command a similar kind of following, like
Yeah.
you mentioned, Andrew Tate,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah, I think it's this, like, first of all, like the reality of what the internet is and the landscape that the internet is that there might be sometimes this idea that someone may be extremely, influential in the sense that he commands, influence over a vast amount of people. But if you look at the internet, sometimes people are followed. If you see, for example, someone like Kim Kardashian or someone like that, or even someone like Andrew Tate, there's also a considerable amount of people who follow him in order to find faults, in order to keep up with him, in order to, constantly push back
It's
on
almost
it.
like career iconoclasts.
Yes.
Who target those who have been put up on a pedestal.
Yeah.
To kind of pull the rug out from under their feet.
What do you think he represents, Andrew Tate? What kind of sentiment in society? The reason for his popularity, the reason why suddenly in our world he's becoming so big and seemingly so many people can relate with him.
I feel like there's a small number of incredibly influential figures who have emerged in the last number of years. Although there are like some stark differences between them, like the example of Andrew Tate. You also have like other Jordan Peterson, for
yeah.
example, who is kind of a different intellectual paradigm. But from my perspective, they seem to speak to, at least in these two examples, a kind of a disaffected male audience.
Franchise, perhaps.
Yeah. A huge of onus has been put on, or a huge amount of weight has been put onto a man's ability either to acquire material wealth or to attract women, and obviously those things in today's day and age are like very closely connected.
But like the question here is that and obviously there's derogatory terms for these men, incels. They're called incels.
Incels, yeah.
Right. If you weren't out to go back 20 years ago, did these people exist as well? Why?
Yeah.
Is it a new phenomenon?
I think like the idea that Andrew Tate, the gifts he offers, he offers a retreat. So from my perspective, the way I view Andrew Tate is that, we've got this new world order, like what he calls, whatever a lot of people call the liberal world order, and it's been around for, ever since arguably the fall of the USSR, and then after 9/11, countries started to look inwards. I think after the war on terror had failed, after these attempts at expansionism, attempts at using foreign policy to not necessarily distract but provide an outlet for certain emotions that you can encapsulate within a nation. But now that era is finished, and I think that Andrew Tate is the embodiment of this era of introspection, of this era of looking in, but he's offering a certain view. So his conclusions are that, we look into our world, everything is, like he argues, that the West is a failed society. So by that manner, he offers a retreat back into traditional values. He offers a retreat back into what people found comfortable and what people found, their parents to have believed in. And slowly, as their children grow up, those values become disillusioned. And I think Andrew Tate's a very good embodiment of that idea. of that retreat back into traditionalism, that wavement.
What things has he said that
traditional?
make you
So
like-
upholding the family, upholding the ideas of the traditional roles of males and females in society.
You're saying that he upholds those values?
No, he doesn't uphold them, but he propagates them. So he propagates them. So on his show, him necessarily as a character, that's a whole different story. I think that's a whole different debate. But what he represents within society is he tries to enfranchise this like we spoke about, this disenfranchised people that have inherently are not connected with the order right now, and cannot find identity within what's offered right now. And Andrew Tate gives them a very solid way to craft their identity.
But I think I find that difficult to resolve. He's a self-professed pornographer, pimp.
Yeah.
He talks about breaking out of the paradigm of this kind of
9 to 5.
9 to 5. The thing is, the world we live in, as it is, this matrix that he describes it as, is one where we're kind of bombarded by these aspirational imagery, very sort of materialistic ideals. He says break out of that and buy a Bugatti. So how there are,
I think
for me there are clear contradictions here, because he's saying
there are.
He's saying aspire to do more than just work 9 to 5 for these material things. Actually find ways to make more money and buy more material things.
Yeah.
So
Buy more. I think material for him is not an end in and of itself. It's an example of what can be achieved when you break out of the supposed matrix. And I think the idea that he constructs this matrix that we live in, and that's why he constructs this idea in contrast to it. So his idea, regardless, I agree that there are contradictions, but I think the sentiment that he represents is one of disillusionment, and I think because he represents such a strong feeling within society that even those contradictions, they matter less.
I think someone. Apologies.
Yeah, no.
I think someone like, and as controversial as he is, I think someone like Kanye West's philosophical proposal seems a bit more radical in that sense, because
some incredibly controversial things in the last
very, very radical, because what Kanye West does is Kanye West has been in cohorts with industry, and he has fought industry in order to the very material things that we want, to make them affordable, that everyone can partake in a belief. And that's one thing. But the other thing and that's why I mean his philosophy, is the idea that he talks about the idea that there are these people who are the matrix, and those people use celebrities, influencers like Andrew Tate, to just propagate more of that stuff.
The message I get from Andrew Tate is ditch that matrix and choose this matrix instead.
No, but he's still, the thing is, Andrew Tate hasn't built a sort of like an open-ending system on his own where you can partake. He's still part of the greatest. Because when he buys a Bugatti, who is he promoting? Is he promoting Andrew Tate? Or is he promoting Bugatti? Or is he doing both things?
True. I think, I don't know the guy. I sense that, because I find there are like quite gaping contradictions in some of his narrative. I think that he's probably somebody who is riding this wave of, people love Bugattis, people love the Playboy lifestyle. Yeah. It is attractive to people. But I think he's someone who is clearly a family man.
Yeah.
And I think that there is probably this person with traditional values lurking under that bravado.
We can talk about his conversion to Islam, I think that's something very, very important in his own image. And I think that's done a lot to cement this image as a traditionalist and as a man that kind of retreats. Doesn't necessarily retreat, but it goes into the Islamic understanding of traditional families, and because I think he knows he's tapped into something very, I think, prominent in society right now, which is the idea that Christianity has lost its traditional touch. Christianity as a whole, there are Roman Catholics in Italy, there are Orthodox in Russians, which are very religious, but as a whole, if you take it, Islam is much more religiously upheld, if you like, in the sense that by itself, by virtue of practicing this religion, there is an assumption that it's going to be more traditional, it's going to be more retreating back further. So I think it's a very smart, calculated move that he's done that.
Well, I'm glad that you characterize it that way. Yeah. I mean, I don't claim to be able to read the mind of a man.
No.
But we kind of touched on this earlier. There seemed to be, just given the variables that were in play, the fact that his freedom to speak on the platforms where he's built up such a degree of notoriety was starting to clamp down on him. He was beginning to be censored. And I felt that there was I was getting a sense that he was like any port in the storm. Although he has always been someone who's spoken well of Islam.
Yeah.
I felt like the timing of it seemed to be like a counteraction to this censorship, and suddenly he had a big platform again.
True.
And I would liken that actually to, for example, when Kanye West, way back when, suddenly was pictured siding with Donald Trump. And it was only a matter of time before he jumped that ship when Donald Trump didn't appear to be able to provide him with that platform.
Himself personally.
And so I fear that those who have been so in support of this move by
Andrew Tate,
I fear that he may also deploy a similar strategy of jumping that ship eventually, only because I don't think he's established a track record of reliability or consistency in his message.
Yeah, but I think that regardless of that, he has already established the Muslim audience,
Yeah.
I think he's already entrenched that, and I think that I agree, like the contradictions, all of that seem to be completely smothered over through his conversion to Islam. I think it's a very important factor in what he represents and in what in general I think he's a symptom of a broader fracture within society.
Yeah.
I think the religion has declined. We've lost religion. But we've had this alternative with this world order that we inhabit, where everything is, diversity is pushed onto us, inclusion, these ideas are pushed onto us, these ideas, cancel culture as well. So all of these ideas, but yet they're pushed forward by the establishment. Yet a lot of the people that are supposed to be receiving that information aren't very receptive towards it. And it's inherently, there's becoming an increasing backlash against it. So I think Andrew Tate, people like you mentioned Jordan Peterson, these guys are all symptoms and remedies and symptoms of a counter-revolution, I think.
I mean, there's this fascinating video I watched yesterday, and it's Jordan Peterson on stage, and he's like giving a talk. And then erratically, this guy out of the audience jumps out and goes like, Dr. Jordan Peterson, my name is David. I need help. I'm well. Like he is a grown man, right? Screaming for help. So like, what type of world does that guy live in?
Yeah.
And what was sold to him that Jordan Peterson is going to be the cure to his problem?
Exactly, because in a way,
it's crazy.
In a way, they're trying to not substitute religion, but create something similar to it in the sense of established values, in the sense of not where values right now in our world are very changing. It's almost as if as technology increases, development goes up. It's almost like the values that are previously existed cannot catch up. Simply with the institutions, they're changing too quickly. So we are in a world right now where the Church of England is a mere, it doesn't have any, it has influence on paper, but in our world, not many people can resonate with it, which is the purpose of institutions.
Yeah.
So I think in a world where institutions have not necessarily outrun their worth, these people gain more prominence in the sense that they offer solid, straight guidance in a world where one cannot find guidance that easily.
But you see, in terms of like, if we go even deeper, psychologically speaking, right, on like a sort of like collective level, like, so the idea here is that ambiguity is really what is causing these issues, because if you look at this, there are a considerable amount of people who are saying, well, it's either this or that. You can't be a female, you can't be a male in a female's body, and vice versa. You're either right or you're left wing. You're either so that this.
Well, I would echo that.
Yeah.
Just kind of referring to what you're saying. There's also this idea that you're either Christian or you're Muslim.
Yeah.
but actually,
Yeah.
there are options.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it also invalidates the other beliefs as well. Because
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
same
yeah.
time, you know, that is a very Western now. I mean, it's become a very
It
Western
is also
argument.
identity politics.
It's identity, and Islam inherently, you know, because of also the migrant problems, the 2010s, you know, was a very rocky time, I think,
Yeah.
for, you know, so in terms of terrorism, in
Yeah.
terms of Western intervention.
Yeah.
So all of these things now, I think, have molded into a broader kind of argument, a broader debate, whether Islam is the way forward. You know, whether Islam, and people like Andrew Tate have confirmed that they say, yes, you know, I've read all the books, whatever. He's gone on many channels discussing these problems with like famous Muslim YouTubers and famous Muslim kind of like proponents.
Yeah.
And you know, he's come out of it and said, you know, this is the religion I choose.
But I think this is the problem, though. He's spoken to famous religious
legitimacy.
commentators. I haven't seen him in conversation with somebody who's maybe less in the, you know, forefront, less in the sort of fame circles, and with more of a scholarly.
Actually, I've actually
background.
like it's interesting you say that because actually recently I watched a video him talking to quite a scholarly Muslim academic, and he writes books primarily for non-Muslim guy, and it was like a 10-minute clip or so, and he was just telling him about the structure of the Quran and how it's.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Noor Ali Khan. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very interesting debate. But the thing with him, he professes to be a student in those situations. Right. So when he's talking to people that he clearly knows know more than him, he professes he plays the role of a student. And then, you know, that even gives him more legitimacy with his fans because they see him as a person
It's
who
like
listens.
almost self-deprecating.
Yeah,
in a way.
self-deprecating because he needs that a bit because that was before he converted. And then, you know, it all worked together very well because he had that conversation with him. He had a few other conversations.
I think if that's what Andrew Tate is doing, then more power to him. I think
Yeah.
he should be
Yeah.
investigating those avenues, those scholarly avenues,
He
rather
should
than.
be. He should be. But I think he doesn't. It's more of an exception when he does that.
But like,
I think it's seen that way. It's no one really knows what's going on behind
Yeah,
closed
yeah,
doors.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I hope, of course, that he's sincere in his claims.
But you know, this is my problem as someone who sort of is part of the Muslim sort of like community, if you like. Unfortunately, like the very Islam that is discussed when in attachment to Andrew Tate or the people who do talk to Andrew Tate, unfortunately, it's always sort of the surface, sort of like McDonaldized version of Islam, where there's
It's
absolute
like the
catchphrase
religion.
Islam, where there's no nuance. And this is why I'm going back to the idea of like our aversion to ambiguity as a society. And I think like really where it sets down to it, it's that people need answers and people need very simple answers and very clear answers
And they need quick answers.
and quick answers.
But that's the society we live in now. Isn't it?
yeah,
That
but the
instant
world,
gratification.
No,
but
but
the
also-
world isn't like that.
Yeah, it's also a world where those answers, those simple answers, have lost their touch now. And
Yeah.
that's why people are seeking them again.
Yeah.
Because, you know, religion offered simple answers for 1800 years, you know. They were around. But now as society
I think in an age, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah, yeah.
in an age where literacy was maybe not as common as
Yeah,
it
it
is
was
now,
perfectly fine.
you were compelled to accept the simple answers from the few people you trusted.
Yeah.
But now we have the ability to go and investigate and
So it's
understand
much
for
more
ourselves.
complex. We live in a much more complex.
I'm glad you used the word nuance.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
more to human nature. You know, the fact that even in a changing world, even in a world with more answers, we more and more seek the simpler ones. Like Occam's razor, you know, Occam's razor lives on. in that way.
I do understand, but I also understand that human beings are extremely well in adapting and learning. You know, and the fact that we have the literacy is going up, and these are now I'm doing theology now. There are traditions where it says that towards the end of time, literacy is going to go up, but like the knowledge of the self is going to go down.
Okay.
You know, and this is precisely to do with this phenomena that I've been talking about. Is that when people present Islam or anything to a particular crowd as simple, that's fine, but the deeper you go in with anything in life, it's not just Islam, politics, economics, philosophy, it becomes more complex. And we have a lot of people who are traversing and swimming in a pool of complexity. We're talking about gender, and we're talking about gender. These are highly complex situations that everyone
Surely there are as many ways to understand a concept as there are minds to understand it.
Yeah,
Of course.
We all perceive every idea. I mean, I can make an seemingly unambiguous statement, to both of you, but
Yeah.
you will still both understand it in your own way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there seems to be this tendency to nowadays to want to attach to a collective, to be part of something.
A system of belief.
And of course, I'm sure this speaks to some, primitive part of our brain
Yeah.
where there is safety in numbers, strength in numbers.
Herd kind of mentality.
What recently I've been reading a book on ambiguity and it's the Islamic culture. I'll send it to both of you. It's incredibly interesting, and the author in there, I think it's a German scholar, Bauer or something. He says that, like this urge for like preciseness, precision, and exactness in language and like meaning are all sort of like a byproduct of the Enlightenment period. Because now we have calculus and we have all these like measurements to measure like, and the time and space is cut into like, so you can travel now. And all these things have birthed this idea that everything has to be exact and to the point. And the author claims that has also been a detriment to the Islamic world through colonialism, that the Muslims have adapted the same approach.
And like the need to dissect every answer.
Where previously, if you look at medieval literature, that there is a vast array and acceptance for ambiguity. Because
there was a space for it.
Because there is no, like you were saying, there is no meaning without ambiguity. If you're saying something and we both are understanding the same way, there is no meaning in it. Meaning is created in
and it's
us.
interesting, I'm sure, and it's this way above my pay grade. There is something. What you're describing is almost like a quantum quality. Like you can never pinpoint the meaning of the thing, but the meaning is you can
floating around.
You can kind of analogize the meaning.
I mean, it's
of a
Immanuel
thing.
Kant's, thing in itself. There's a thing in itself. It's like the most perfect thing you can imagine, the most perfect way one can imagine something, but it's very, very difficult to separate it from the universe that surrounds it. So it's like that. That thing exists in its own kind of universe. What I'd say about your point about the Enlightenment, I'd say, I think human history went up and down in that way. So I think, for example, during the Greek times, during the time of Socrates, it was the opposite. Everything would be questioned as well. Like Socrates, and he pushed for that, and that's where his philosophy came. That's where Plato's philosophy came out of. The one thing is that he questioned it within certain boundaries. Also assumptions also exist. It's not pure questioning, just absolutely dismantling it for pure sake. There are like bases to which he refers to and to which he goes constantly back to. And I think
there's also a danger with that approach to things. It's like, okay, fine, someone can explain something to the nth degree. The moment you get to the point where they no longer have an answer, aha, I got you. So we found the flaw in your. That's just
no. But that's also, I think that argument, that idea is healthy in itself. And I actually think that in our modern day, it doesn't happen enough. I think because when you go we talked about this herd idea, the idea that people would like prefer to group together into big systems of thought. And I think what's more, I think nowadays
people feel empowered by that.
People feel empowered. But I think also that, in our world, we have such information at our fingertips. In our world where everything is so accessible to us, we can formulate our own opinions. I think the idea of individuality is eroding. It's slowly eroding. It's eroding in an era when it should be increasing, because we're living in the in the past, in the future of the Enlightenment. In the ends of the Enlightenment. So I think that's another big thing and it speaks to some degree of continuity in human.
I think each approach begins to crumble in its own extremes. So I think I felt like this sense that there's been this hyper individualism in society, but then there's also this like blind following of this herd mentality as well. I think how we're really going to resolve all of this is by adopting a more compatibilist approach. Okay, you can question things to a degree, you can follow blindly to a degree, but actually...
But this is where like a lot of people think Jordan Peterson is wrong when he criticizes things like postmodernity, with the pretense that he does not understand postmodernity. Because that's precisely what you're explaining, there is postmodernity. The idea that there are meta-narratives, there are many, many more narratives now than just this one narrative that's been told.
And it's difficult to classify what age we live in, really. It's almost as if, like I say, we live in an age of fracture. We live in an age where, stuff is
I'm sure somebody will correct me. Very dear friend of mine is a Hindu. He says that in Hindu circles they describe the age we live in now as the age of quarrel.
Really?
And
Okay.
I think they have some like, apocalyptic narrative in their ideology.
So they go by
and that's
calendar
one of
or
the-
something.
That may also be one of the signs.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think also it's our inability to define where we are is
Yeah.
only a merit to us. I think it provides the ground, the breeding ground for what I think what's not studied enough nowadays is philosophy. Is actually philosophy, not just religion, because a lot of people do seek religion and they do seek philosophy and religion. Theology is a beautiful academic subject, but I think there's not enough genuine philosophical thinking for itself. There's too much thinking for what the thinking will give to you.
will achieve.
The external goods.
Yeah.
So you'll think you'll get a good job, you'll get paid well, you have a solid, good family, solid life, but there's no thinking for the act of itself.
Right.
So instead of, I think, people accept things without really, sitting there and thinking really is an activity. It's an activity. Like if you sit there, think hard, you write down your thoughts, you develop your thinking. That should be, I think, in my opinion, more people should really devote that because it's an age of we have too many answers and not enough questions.
So you kind of raise this issue about defining the age in
Yeah.
which we live. But do you think, other than the obvious names, the names that have been recorded in history, do you think though the average man living during the European Renaissance was sitting there thinking,
This is
we're
the
living in
Renaissance.
the Renaissance?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, the Renaissance is also a historical construction.
Yeah.
It's also the future shining down on the past. So a lot of people would argue there's not a Renaissance,
Right.
That the Renaissance is a mere construction to divide history into comfortable ideas.
And we just
a
looking
narrative,
back at it
a narrative,
in
really.
relation to
Yeah.
the age that went before.
Oh,
it,
and
for
the relation to
example.
age that we have now.
Sure.
We're trying to explain where we are now, and the Enlightenment is a very helpful way of doing that. But I think at the same time that I agree that the average man he was not self-conscious in that way.
The average man was just toiling.
No, but
trying
at
to
the same
meet like
time,
we are now.
I think the idea of development in the human mind, I think that we can move towards a stage where it's more promoted.
I do believe, though, that there are certain markers for this age that we're in. I mean, depending on what political spectrum, because these seem to be like the dominating sort of like fractions people classify others in. So the cancel culture era, Me Too, Black Lives Matter.
But I think it depends who's making that assessment.
No, but
Because
I'm saying
many
just-
Muslims I speak to will say, "Oh, we're living in the end of days."
Yeah,
I understand. But I'm saying sort of purely from a sort of Western perspective,
Right.
you find that people would throw these names around, or Black Lives Matter, Me Too, if you're an...
And if you actually look at those institutions, if you
Yeah.
look at Black Lives Matter, you look at LGBTQ.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree that what the movements they represent. Historically, they've been persecuted against in the Western world, both of them. Slavery and the attack on individual rights. That's a prominent feature of Western history, and I think it's in themselves as institutions they represent something in society, but they don't represent enough. Because the problem is that BLM, LGBTQ, they offer a certain degree of fulfillment within our world. They offer some kind of I can fight for what I believe in. But they don't answer the same questions that religion does. In that way, they don't offer I don't think they offer the same degree of pleasure, the same idea of the hereafter, the idea that you'll be looked, you act in a certain way and you'll be looked after. It's not that. It's just purely this idea of conflict. It's this idea, this voluntary idea. You go into conflict with the values of the time.
My problem, and to play devil's advocate, is that religion hasn't caught up on it, unfortunately,
That's it.
because if religion had caught up on it, or those people who propagate religion, then people wouldn't go to these alternatives that are out there, or because religion is, again, it's been protected, it's been put into this,
Special status.
and because of that, people engage with it in a very sort of the very thing that religious people always blame, just partition between church and state has occurred in the everyday life of people. So when it comes to religion, well, religion is here sort of but again, and I said this to someone like Ali Darwin, I've talked to some of my friends about this, that the only reason why Andrew Tate was able to gain so much ground in the Muslim community was because people were looking at you, speaking to Ali Dawa and Muhammad Hijab, as oh, it's like a supermarket. Okay, I want a bit of sugar religion over there. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, masculinity over here.
Yes, yeah. Pick
So
and choose.
So,
Pick and choose.
yeah, so the commodification and compatibilization of religion has occurred
Yeah.
in the everyday life, and that's why there's
It's been married to our consumer society. It's almost
It's been packaged in a
Yeah.
consumer-friendly
packaged
way.
in that way, and I think that that's the problem. And I do agree that
Yeah.
religion nowadays. Okay,
It should be more of an introspective.
It should be an introspective thing. That's what I mean, and I think broadly that there should be more. Like what I said at the beginning, Andrew Tate is an embodiment of this era of introspection. Because
Yeah.
people, when they watch Andrew Tate
Yeah.
and they decide to follow him,
Yeah.
inevitably there is a period of introspection.
Yeah.
They think about themselves.
Yeah.
They think about
Yes.
themselves and then they go to him. But I'm saying that that's misguided. So his form, his fruits, like as Aristotle would say, what he offers, they're not. It's not what should be. It's not what should be given, but it's what's packaged, and it's very like what you were saying.
Yeah.
It's very positive, and it's very it's very conducive
Yeah.
to the consumer society.
yeah,
So
I fear, however, that many of these things that are packaged, very difficult to grasp ideas, are packaged
Yeah.
in a seemingly
Yeah.
very
Simple.
easy to
Yeah.
acquire.
and that's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Is that when
They-
you
they-
do
usually
introspect,
there's nothing.
when you do introspect,
supporting.
you don't go very far.
yeah,
That's the point.
While we're talking about these like social media icons, so to speak, just in the last couple of days, the Liver King,
yeah.
Outed
yeah.
himself.
Yes, he got exposed.
he's been speaking
I mean,
since he first emerged.
yeah.
He's been saying how to have the body
I
of,
saw
of
that.
an
Yeah,
Adonis,
yeah, yeah.
how to
Primordial
Yeah.
7.
yeah the
Principles.
7 tenets or
Yeah, tenets.
principles of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
primordial life or whatever
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
And then he sat down in front of a camera and said, "I've lied to you all. I'm on shitloads of steroids."
But hold on, like he didn't have to say that. It was obvious from day dot,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But I think it's impactful because he's admitting to it. But this is the point we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Again, it's a very superficial, and there are. I've read an article years ago and it was about a phenomenon that was taking place amongst like young people when it comes to fashion and like clothing, and the author was saying that so we live sort of in the aesthetic period, so it's more to do with like how things look, how things look,
Aestheticism.
yeah, or how things make you feel, because the way something looks makes you feel a type of way.
True.
True.
Like
So-
design. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where the introspection comes in.
And I think it's an important additional nuance there. It's how something looks to other people.
Yeah,
How what it
Inevitably.
tells them about you.
yeah,
Not
Yeah.
come on. If I put a jacket on, I'm looking outwards.
Yeah, you
It
can't
doesn't
see
say-
yourself in
It
the
doesn't
jacket.
make me. I don't see it. It doesn't make me feel anything about myself. What makes me feel something is how I believe other people are perceiving.
Of course.
yeah, yeah.
And that's an important point. But I think for us, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
Great discussion.
I'm sorry. What was your name? again?
Alexei. Yeah.
I think we should continue, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I wouldn't mind talking to Ali DAWUD.
Yeah, he's over here.
I wouldn't mind. Yeah, I want to do a conversation with him about Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When he comes along, I'll tell him.
Of course.